Copilot is your everyday AI companion in Microsoft Word. Whether you're writing a business proposal, drafting guidelines, composing a letter, or reviewing a lengthy document, Copilot can help you brainstorm ideas, strengthen your writing, analyze documents to give you key takeaways, and much more. And you can accomplish all of these tasks just by chatting with Copilot using plain conversational language. Hi, I'm LinkedIn Learning Senior Staff Instructor Garrick Chow, and in this course, we're going to look at some of the most useful ways you can have Copilot enhance your writing and boost your productivity. The name Copilot is used by Microsoft for several of their products and services, so before we jump into this course, I want to take a moment to clarify how the name applies to this specific course on using Copilot in Microsoft Word. First, we have a free version of Copilot. Anyone can use Copilot on the web by going to copilot.microsoft.com to ask questions, draft text, and generate images. There are some limitations to the free version of Copilot, such as the number of prompts you can use per day being capped, and the responses from Copilot potentially being a little bit slower. But again, anyone can use this web-based version of Copilot for free without an account. But the free version doesn't allow you to use Copilot in Microsoft 365 applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. To use Copilot through those and other M365 apps, you have to have a paid subscription to Copilot through either a personal or individual account, or an account through your work or school, also referred to as a business account. If you're subscribing as an individual, you'll be subscribing to Copilot Pro, which is currently $20 a month. And you can see that one of the features of Copilot Pro is you can access Copilot in Microsoft 365 apps, which is not available through the free web-based version of Copilot. Now, if your Microsoft account is through your work or school, that's considered a business account. And the subscription for business accounts is called Microsoft 365 Copilot. In most cases, if you have your subscription through work or school, your network administrator or IT department will set up your Copilot subscription for you, and you'll see Copilot when you open your Microsoft 365 applications without having to do anything yourself. All right, so that's a quick overview of the different Copilot subscriptions. For this course, just bear in mind that you must have either a Copilot Pro or a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription to see Copilot in Microsoft Word. Now, there's actually a lot more to what the term Copilot encompasses. If you'd like to learn more about what Copilot entails across Microsoft's products and services, including more about the web-based version of Copilot, be sure to check out my colleague Nick Brazzi's course, What is Copilot? Get started with Microsoft's everyday AI companion. Copilot is a great resource to have at your fingertips when you're staring at the proverbial blank slate, wondering where to start with the document that you need to create. I've started up Word, and let's create a new blank document. When you first do this, you may see some of these Copilot prompts above the document. We have things like produce insights from file, create a proposal based on file, draft a business memo. And clicking on any of these automatically starts a prompt in this prompt area. So when you write a command or request to an AI, what you're writing is called a prompt. Now, we're not going to get too deeply into all the best practices of prompt writing in this course, but as a general rule, it's a good idea to be clear about what you want, to provide some context, and to be as specific as possible. So for example, let's say I'm a manager and I want to create a document to help guide my employees through the process of writing their annual self-reviews. To have Copilot help me draft this document from scratch, I might write something like, act as a manager and generate a set of guidelines to help employees write their annual self-review. Provide a checklist of items for employees to work through. Keep the language and tone of the document professional. So here I'm telling it to take on the perspective of being a manager. And I'm telling it what I want. A checklist my employees can follow to guide them through their self-evaluations. And I specified that the tone and language should be professional. Now, given that I told it to act as a manager, the tone and language would be pretty professional. But I like including these kinds of instructions so there isn't any doubt about what I want. All right, so I'll come down here and click the Generate button and see what we get. And there it is. So just like that, we've gone from blank page to this multi-page formatted document. So for my brief prompt, it's generated sections like the introduction, guidelines for writing your self-review, which is broken down into reflect on your achievements, be honest and objective, use specific examples, and so on. And we have a conclusion at the end. Now, of course, even though this generated document can apply to any number of organizations or roles, it's a good idea to always consider Copilot-generated content as a first draft, and to always read every word it generates to make sure it applies to your situation and to customize it to suit your needs. Notice it even says here in the prompt window that AI-generated content may be incorrect. So never just take what it generates and send it out into the world without reviewing and rewriting it yourself. Now, with that said, if the results weren't quite what you were looking for, or if you want to make a slight change, Copilot can continue to help you. We'll talk more about revising and refining text in the next chapter, but some things you can do after generating your content include coming down to the prompt window, and here we have a Keep It button, which you can click if you're happy with the results. If you want to try again, you can click the Regenerate button, and it will go through the entire process again, giving you slightly different results from the same prompt. So now we have a new version of the document to check out. And the great thing about this is you can come down to the prompt window and use these arrows to switch back and forth between the different versions to see which one you prefer to use as the starting point for your document. Now, if there are elements of both that you like, you might want to copy and paste them into a separate document. But in this case, let's say I like version 2, so with that selected, I'll click Keep It. And now I have the starting point for my document to work with. Again, we'll look more closely at revising and rewriting content in the next chapter, but for now, that's just one example of using Copilot to draft a new document from nothing. From other blank documents, you could have Copilot draft a letter or generate an article or social media post. In fact, for some examples of prompts you could use, from the Home ribbon, we'll click the Copilot button to open up the Copilot panel. This is another area where you can write your prompts, but this is more for taking advantage of Copilot's abilities like chatting, answering questions, and so on. We'll be spending more time in this panel later. But you can see here that we have some prompt starters like summarize this doc, create an image, tell me more about the references this document makes, and so on. And you'll often see additional prompts down here at the bottom like summarize this doc and is there a call to action. Also down here you can click the View Prompts button, which gives me this window with some prompt examples for creating content. Write more confidently, find specific information. We can also click this Tasks menu to narrow down the types of prompts we want to see here. And that gives me some ideas like craft headline candidates, create FAQ, and so on. So I could start with one of these like create FAQ, which places a prompt into the prompt field that I can then customize as needed. Or, of course, I could just create a new blank document, and I can write my own prompts at any time. By the way, if you click into the document and just start typing, and the Copilot prompt field at the top disappears, I could just delete that, and that gives me this Copilot icon in the margin, and clicking that brings these prompts and the prompt field back at the top. And you can always open up the Copilot panel and type your prompt here as well. So for example, maybe this time I'll say, generate a list of do's and don'ts to follow when writing a self-evaluation for work. And then I'll click the Send button to have Copilot respond to this prompt. And there it is. Now, unlike using the Copilot prompt in the window of the document itself, using the Copilot panel keeps the responses in the panel, so I can review the content here without affecting my document. But if I like what it's generated, I can click the Copy button and then paste that into my document. All right, so that's using Copilot to draft a new document from scratch. Now, you can also give Copilot documents you already have to use as a reference for information or to match their tone when drafting new content. And we'll see how to do that next. As we previously saw, you can use Copilot to generate documents completely from scratch. But if you want Copilot to generate content and match the tone and style of your writing or your organization style, you can have it reference up to 3 existing files that it can use when creating your new document. For example, I have here the Social Media Training Manual for Globe Bank International. This is a 28-page document covering the guidelines for posting on various social media platforms. Now this file is saved on my OneDrive, which is important because if you want Copilot to be able to access and reference a document, and it can be a Word document or a PowerPoint file, but that file has to be saved in your organization's OneDrive or SharePoint. So with that in mind, I'm going to close this and open up a new blank document. And here at the top in the prompt area, I'll tell it that I want it to draft a document of guidelines for employees posting to LinkedIn, include an introductory section explaining the importance of following the guidelines, and a conclusion at the end summarizing the document. Now here I'm going to click the Attach button to allow me to reference my content. When you click this, you should see a list of the most recent documents in your OneDrive. Now if the one you want appears here, you can just select it. Alternately, notice it placed a slash here in the prompt area, and it says you can start typing the name of a file for Copilot to work with. So I could start typing that file name to locate the file that I want to use. Once I see it, I can select it. Now do note that sometimes it takes several minutes or longer for your files to show up here. So if you only recently saved a file to your OneDrive a few minutes ago, you might not see it right away. But you can enter its full name here after the / even if it doesn't show up right away, and Copilot should be able to find and reference it. But in this case, I did see it, so I was able to select it. And again, you can add up to 3 files to reference. Now, notice nowhere in my prompt did I mention that these guidelines should be for employees of Globe Bank specifically. But let's click the Generate button and see what we get. And there it is. And even though I didn't mention Globe Bank in my prompt, notice the document does mention the company name, so we know that Copilot did in fact reference the document I selected. Now, as with the document we previously created completely from scratch, you always want to carefully review what Copilot has generated, even from referenced files, to check its accuracy, scope, and tone. And again, we can come down here and click the Regenerate button to have it give us another variation of the document, or if we like what it generated, we can click Keep It. And we can start working on this document from here. So be sure to take advantage of this ability to reference your existing files with Copilot to improve and enhance the content it generates for you. Whether you're working with a document that Copilot generated for you, or you're working in a document you're composing yourself, Copilot can help you figure out what comes next, or add more to your document. For this example, I've opened up a version of the document on guidelines for writing an annual self-review that we previously generated. And maybe after reading through this document, I think I could use some more content to help employees write the reviews. So I'll come down here and add a line before the conclusion, and then I'll click the Copilot button in the margin. Notice when working in a document that already has content, we have this Inspire Me button. This can come in handy when you're not sure what to write or add to your document, and clicking it will have Copilot examine the surrounding text and generate some related content. In this case, though, I kind of know what I want, so I'm going to type in my prompt. And we'll say, create a section with the heading of example questions and generate a list of questions that employees can answer to help them write their self-evaluations. Include a brief introduction explaining how to use the questions. Maintain the tone of the document, and reference other sections as necessary. So again, you want to be as specific as you can with your prompt to ensure that you get the content that best suits your needs. So for example, I specified that the intro paragraph for this section should be brief, and it should try to maintain the tone of the document. We'll click Generate. And there we have it. Copilot has created this new section that fits with the rest of my document. It's created the heading Example Questions, just like I asked, and I can see this bulleted list of questions it came up with. And as before, we can keep it, regenerate it, or delete it. Now you can also refine what it's written by typing in the prompt area. So if you wanted to change the tone, or tell it to add more questions, or to shorten the intro paragraph, you could do so from here. In this case, though, I'll just keep what it generated. And then I could come through here and edit and format it as necessary. And now we've used Copilot to add this new section to our existing document. Again, be sure to always review and edit any content generated by Copilot, but this is a great starting point. In addition to generating text, Copilot can also generate images for your documents. This could be useful if you need a specific image to illustrate a section of your document, or if you need to come up with some ideas for some office layouts and want some images to look at, or you simply can't find the image you need on the web or with stock images. For example, here I have a document about the origin of Globe Bank, and I want an image to go along with it. I'll open up the Copilot panel, and down here in the prompt area, I'll ask it to generate an image of a bank on a small hometown street. The image should be warm and inviting. So just as with prompts you write to generate text, Copilot will give you the best results when you provide descriptive prompts. So instead of just saying, give me an image of a bank, I added more details like what kind of bank it is, where it's located, and the tone. We'll click send. And after a moment, Copilot gives us our options. So we can see these by selecting them and then clicking Insert. And we can see that adds it to our document. I can undo that and maybe select a different one. And once you're happy with an image, you're free to move it around, resize it, and arrange it how you like on your page. Now, in addition to generating images, Copilot can also pull up stock images as part of your Microsoft 365 subscription. Just specify that you want a stock image by typing a prompt like, add a stock image of a board meeting. And we can see the ones it's found here. And there it is. So Copilot can find all kinds of stock images, and if it can't find exactly what you need, you can ask it to generate images for you. In this chapter, we're going to look at some ways Copilot can help when you already have some content in your Word document, but maybe you don't like the way you worded a sentence or paragraph, or you want to strike a more casual tone. For this example, I have a draft of an article about the origins of Globe Bank. And let's say I'm not really happy with this second to last sentence here that says, still at its core, Globe Bank International remains a community bank focusing on the specific needs of individuals and organizations in each community in which its branches are located. And I want to come up with some alternate versions of what I've written. So I'll select that text. And that gives us our Copilot icon in the margin. We'll click that. And because I have some text selected, as opposed to in the previous chapter when we were generating content on blank lines, we have the choice here to write a prompt, auto rewrite, or visualize as a table. I'm going to choose auto rewrite. And that gives us three options to choose from. We have Globe Bank International remains a community bank addressing the needs of individuals and organizations in each local area. A slightly longer sentence here, and yet a third variation. Now, if I like any of these, I can simply click Replace, and that replaces the selected text with that alternative. Let's undo that, and I'll click the Copilot button and choose to auto rewrite again. And again, we get three different options. Now, sometimes you'll like one of the options, but not so much that you want to entirely replace your selected text. Maybe you like some elements of both what you've written and what Copilot has generated. In those cases, you can click Insert Below. So now I have both versions of the sentence, and I could spend some time writing a version that combines them together. Let's just undo that again. And I'll ask for another rewrite. Now the rewrite window also has this prompt area, and from here you can specify what you want Copilot to change or keep about the selected text. For example, you might want to specify what tone you want the rewrite to strike. Maybe I want a friendlier tone, so I'll say, keep the tone friendly. So it takes that into account when doing this rewrite. And maybe I like that, but I also want to expand this to emphasize our role in the community. And it's now generated this extra paragraph on the role the bank plays in the community, supporting small businesses and so on. So you have a decent amount of control over how Copilot rewrites your content. And again, if it generates something you like, you can choose to replace the existing version or insert it below and continue revising it. If you think some text in your document would be better presented as a table, instead of you having to manually create a table and copy and paste your text into it, Copilot can do this for you. I'm currently working with a version of the annual self-evaluation document we generated earlier. And here under the Guidelines for Writing Your Self-Review section, we have several bullet points. Each bullet point has a step followed by an explanation or example of how to follow that step. Let's see if this information can be more effective when presented as a table. So I'm just going to select that entire list. I'll click the Copilot icon and choose Visualize as a Table. And there it is. Copilot has taken that information and converted it into a table with a column for the steps and a column for the details of each step. And as always, you can click the Regenerate button if you wanted to take another try. And you can see in this case it actually benefited me because now I see we have 3 columns: step, action, and details. So if it didn't do quite what you wanted, you can always click that Regenerate button and see if it does a better job. And as always, you can toggle between the versions to see which one you like. And you can also further add to the table using the prompt area. For example, maybe I'll say, add an empty 4th column, because maybe I have an idea for another column I can add to this table. And there it is. And I'll click Keep It. And now I have this table in my document. So that's how to use Copilot to convert text into a table in Word. In addition to being extremely helpful with documents that you compose yourself, Copilot can also come in handy when you need to read or review other documents, especially particularly lengthy documents. So here I have an annual report from H+ Sports. This is a 13-page document, and if I scroll through, you can see it contains multiple sections. So this is a lot of information to take in, and maybe I'm short on time, or I only need certain information from the document. Let's open up the Copilot panel. And down here at the bottom of the panel, I'll select the Summarize This Doc prompt. Now this part may take a while depending on the length of your document. Also, as of this recording, Copilot is limited to processing up to 80,000 words in a single query. If your document is longer than that, you may have to break it into separate documents or select just the section you want to have summarized. But this document is only about 4,600 words, so Copilot can handle that easily. And now it's given us the summary of the main ideas of the report. So now I can read a short summary of the sections that Copilot feels are important. Now, this doesn't cover everything we saw in the document when we scrolled through it, but we can ask follow-up questions for more information on the information Copilot provided, or we can ask about parts that it didn't mention. So for example, maybe I want to know more what's covered in this section on diversity and inclusion. So I could type something like, summarize the diversity initiatives covered in this doc. And there it is. When providing summaries, Copilot will usually include references. Notice the numbers that appear in the summary. Rolling over the numbers tells me what page it got that information from. And clicking one will take me to that section of the document, with that section briefly highlighted. Note that, as always, the Copy button appears here, so you can click that to copy the summary Copilot generated and paste it into another document, or maybe an email to share with colleagues or anyone who needs that information. But you also might find that you need to have a little more back and forth with Copilot to get more useful information out of the document. You can often get better results by providing more context or asking more detailed questions. For example, I might ask, What are the key takeaways for stockholders in this document? And now we've extracted things like the important financial information from the document. Or as another example, maybe I want to know, what are the action items related to the sustainability initiatives in the doc? And there's that summary. And even if you're not sure what to ask, notice there are prompt suggestions right below the summary, like can you provide more details on the employee gardens and what are the benefits of using organic fibers for clothing? And you can click on any of those to ask that question. Now lastly, you can even have Copilot generate new content based on the document. For example, maybe I need to share the main points of the document with my teammates, and I could write something like this. Summarize the main points of the doc in bullet points and include an intro paragraph on why they're important to company employees. And now I have a summary of the document, but with the added context of the value of this information to employees of the company. So that's a quick look at how to summarize documents and dig deeper with Copilot in Word. Again, be aware that Copilot usually does better the more you chat back and forth with it. If it doesn't give you the results you want right away, try asking your question in a different way or add more details or parameters to your prompts. When working on a document, Copilot can be a useful research assistant. Instead of switching to your web browser or another app, you can try asking Copilot questions to help support or enhance your document. For example, I'm working on the Globe Bank social media manual here in Word, and in this section called Platforms We Use, the manual offers suggestions about each major social media platform and what to post to them. I'll open up the Copilot panel. And maybe I want to add some practical information to the section on LinkedIn, like what is the ideal resolution for a LinkedIn profile photo? Notice it says it's combing through web results, documents, and emails that it found relevant. So Copilot has performed a web search to find this info, and it didn't pull this info from the document we're looking at. Now again, like with all things Copilot does, be sure to check its accuracy. But with this information it's provided, I could copy and paste it into my document and revise it as necessary. Or maybe I want to ask Copilot a more open-ended question to make sure I'm not missing or forgetting anything in this section. So I'll ask it, what other platforms or information should be included in the Platforms We Use section of this document? And here's Copilot's reply. And again, I might not use all or any of this information, but this is useful to me to make sure I haven't excluded any important platforms from this document. Maybe we don't use Pinterest or Snapchat, but we do have a TikTok account. So I'll need to come up with something for that. I'll ask it to generate a guideline on how Globe Bank should use TikTok and base your response on the other social media platform descriptions used in this document. And there's the response. And now I can use what Copilot has generated to help me write the company's guidelines for using TikTok.